All right. Hello, City First. Well, I want to take a moment and I want to welcome our entire church family. Let's welcome Cape Coral and Hononegah and Dixon and Hardy and online and on TV. We love you guys very much. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is the first day of July, or first weekend, of July, which is kind of crazy. Already it feels like a third of summer has already gone by. Slow down, summer, right? Come on. Especially those of you that are like younger and you're on summer break right now and you're about ready to go back to school in August or September. How many of you want the summer to slow down a little bit, huh? Yeah, all of us do. And you know what? I just want to say that we are going into a brand new series right now for the month of July. It is a summer series. We're calling it Summer Playlist, all right? And we are talking about things that are on repeat, or in other words, things that we should do repetitively as individuals, that we should do these different things, and it gives us a quality life, a purpose-filled life, and most of all, it gives us a life that God can bless. And so this entire month, we're talking about things that should be on repeat. And today, I'm launching strong with something that's very close to my heart, all right? And I want to talk today about something that should be on repeat in our lives that I think every single one of us needs to hear. Whether we are 12 years old or we are 82 years old, I want you to listen in today. And I'm not just saying this, I really want you to listen in today because I believe the topic I'm going to talk about is something that right now we desperately need, not only in our culture, but especially in our individual lives, all right? We need this very, very bad. So listen closely to what I have to say today. A few years ago, actually about 5 years ago or so, I went to Israel and I was able to go to the Holy Land. And actually we were filming a life group series here for City First. And so I went with a team there and I got to see a lot of the sites that I'd preached about for years or I'd been taught in Sunday school or you know, going to places that were very, very famous. And it was a really amazing trip. Well, on the Friday morning of our trip, our guide, who was an individual who lived in Jerusalem, a Jewish man, he was our guide, and he pulled us aside and he goes, "Hey, listen, I want to warn you of something. This afternoon, you're going to start seeing that our society, our culture, our city, we're going to start kind of winding down. And by around, evening or so, we as the Jewish people," he said, "we take Shabbat," which is translated Sabbath. Now, some of you have maybe heard of the word Sabbath before, all right? And you know, so he said, we do this as a society, as a culture. In fact, he said, listen, what you're going to start to see is around dinner time tonight on Friday night, you're going to start to see restaurants are going to close. You're going to start to see, like, you know, pretty soon shops are going to close. He said people are not going to prepare any meals after sundown on Friday, all the way for 24 hours until sundown on Saturday. And that pretty much what's going to happen, he said, is that for the most part, everything is just going to shut down. We all spend time with our families. We hang out at our houses. But you're going to notice it's very different than America because, you know, again, he's a tour guide, so a lot of Americans come over. He goes, I watch that Americans don't know what to do with this for 24 hours. We basically don't do anything. I was like, wow, this is really interesting. It was really interesting that literally the next day we got up on Saturday and there was like a little breakfast bar. You know, like at a hotel you get a little breakfast bar. Well, it was a very different breakfast bar. There was no hot items at all. In fact, they had made the coffee the day before on Friday and kept it in a warming container, basically, because again, according to their beliefs, on Sabbath, you cannot do anything that creates energy, fire, heat, electricity. So therefore, the coffee was almost a day old. And everything was kind of like cold cuts and like things that didn't prepare or didn't need preparation. There was no meal that required preparation. Everything had been prepared the day before. And so all of a sudden, here's this American, right? And we're in this now like culture where literally there was a forced stop. And it was radically radically impacting upon our lives, because this is what I notice, us Americans, that we're in this little hotel room. Pretty soon we start looking at each other and being like, well, what do you want to do today? Like we have to talk or something. It was an amazing thing. Literally, the world stopped. And the reason why is this, is the Jewish people believed that Sabbath is a commandment from God. So therefore, it is something they do every single week. Now, some might argue that they maybe even have made it a little bit religious, or they've added on to it and such, or the millennia. Okay, maybe it's true, but I will tell you, it is actually one of the 10 Commandments. How many of you are familiar with the 10 Commandments? Raise your hands at all locations, right? Okay, all of us know the 10 Commandments, or at least we know at least a few of the 10 Commandments, right? There's the one about making know their God before God. You know, in other words, he has to be number one in our lives. You know, it talks about like honoring your father and mother, right? There's ones about like thou shalt not murder, those kind of things. Well, this is the thing. There's actually one about Sabbath. It is actually a commandment. I want to read it real quickly for you. This is what it says in Exodus 20, verses 8 through 11. This is one of the 10 Commandments. It says, remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. Notice that day is to be dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes you, your sons and daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, any foreigners living among you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them. But on the seventh day he rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. The Jewish people take this command very seriously. And you know, we may look at that and be like, oh wow, that's really noble, that's nice. But I have this question. Let's talk about how it pertains to us for a moment. Let's talk about us. Let's talk about Americans. Let's talk about City First. Let's talk about our view of Sabbath. In other words, what is our picture or our view of rest? What does it mean for us to rest? You see, I would propose to you that we really don't believe in the 10 Commandments. You know what I think we believe? We believe in 9 commandments and 1 suggestion. We look at this idea of Sabbath as, oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah, it's optional in our minds. But can I tell you this? I believe there are no times of inactivity in our culture anymore. If you look at our culture, we never stop. We never rest. And if you do rest, it's like you have to almost kind of wedge it into your very busy schedule. Do you know there used to be a forced stop in our nation years and years ago? Some of you remember this. There was what used to be called blue laws. Now, blue laws are actually even still observed in certain nations around the world. So this isn't just a Jewish thing, but rather there were blue laws in America. Now, some of you remember this. Blue laws basically were many, many years ago enacted, and it meant this, that as stores, you could not be open on Sunday. How many of you remember when stores were not open on Sunday? Any of you? Yeah, right? Restaurants many times weren't open on Sunday, and then slowly they began to have restaurants open. You couldn't sell liquor on Sundays. It was kind of like it was a forced stop in our culture and in our nation. You know what you did? You went to church, and then you went home and you had lunch. And then some of you went back to church again at night, right? That was it. It was like the whole freaking world was a Chick-fil-A. Like literally, everything shut down. And you know what? It was interesting, that Saturday that I was in Israel with a crew of people here from City First. That Saturday was very interesting, and I found myself wanting to do something, go shopping, go somewhere. It was the craziest thing. And you know what? Still in this day and age, there are nations around the world who still observe a Sabbath. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Some of you are thinking this. Can I just be honest for a moment? Some of you are thinking, that sounds absolutely terrible. To have one day where everything shuts down, you can't go to the mall, you can't go to the store, you can't do anything because everything's closed. Some of you are like, that sounds absolutely terrible. You know what I would answer to that? A life that is depleted sounds absolutely terrible. A life that is completely empty, fatigued, tired. I want to say this. I am a type A personality, okay? Let me have a moment, all right? I am a type A personality. On all the personality assessments, I'm an executive. I'm an Enneagram 8, if any of you know what Enneagram is, all right? I am an ESTJ. I am Dutch, okay? I'm saying all that to say this. I like hard work. In fact, as through the decades I've met with people, I have great grace for people who have done some egregious sins. I have very little grace for laziness. I will tell you, I'm a person that you can do about anything, and I'm going to love you. If you're lazy, I'm going to have to choose to love you. Okay? Because I don't like laziness. In fact, my kids will probably have to have counseling someday because they've heard me preach so much in the home about laziness, right? So I say all that to say this. My message today is not one that is my default. It's not something that I just naturally think about. Rest, stopping, disconnecting. My personality type is like the Energizer Bunny. In fact, Jen will even tell you, sometimes around the home, she's like, can you just sit down? Can you just stop doing things? Because I'm like, go, 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 go. So this is the thing. This is not a sermon that promotes laziness. And some of you, the minute I said you should rest, you're thinking, he's talking about being lazy. No, 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 no. It's amazing. In America, why have we made rest sound like laziness? You see, this is not about being lazy. In fact, also, it's not about having an easy life. Sometimes in America, I feel like we have this like pursuit of ease. It's like, man, I just want to have ease. I just want to have, it's simple. I just want to not have to stress. I just want to have ease. No, God never calls us to ease, but he does call us to rest. It's a huge difference, all right? You see, we think sometimes in America, rest is a sign of weakness. But nothing could be further from the truth. Actually, the idea of Sabbath challenges our narcissism and reminds us that we cannot do everything in our own effort. Do you hear that? Because we are a very narcissistic society. It's always like, I'm gonna do this, I want this, I, right? Sabbath is about saying, God, today is a day dedicated to you. It's dedicated to you. So here's a question I have, and I want us to really think about this. Why does it seem like today in our culture, everyone is so tired? Isn't that interesting? Now, I don't have time to talk about this because I literally did all this research and I cut it from my sermon because honestly, the sermon would be an hour long otherwise, all right? But I did all this research. Compared to 100 years ago, our work week is significantly shorter than Americans who lived 100 years ago. Okay? In fact, our conditions that we work in are significantly better. The diets that we have, even though sometimes, we're eating bad food and such like that, but I'm just saying in general, our diet is even better than the quality of food that they had 100 years ago. The hands that built America, in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, I'm talking about the Americans and the immigrants that came from all over the world to make this their home. the infrastructure of our nation that was built in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, I'm telling you, it was 70, 80 plus hours a week that people would work, all right? But yet, we're tired today. And can it really even be said that if you spend 30 hours behind a computer doing accounting, that really you're doing a lot of physical activity? No, not at all, really, right? I mean, logic would say you're not, but yet spending 30 or 40 hours in front of the computer screen doing accounting, you leave so fatigued. So why? Why are we so chronically tired as a nation? So I'm going to propose this to you. All right, I'm going to put this out there, and it's for you to agree or disagree, but I want you to wrestle with it, all right? I think the reason why we are so chronically tired as a nation is because we don't take God up on his idea of rest. And you know what we are? We're occupied. We're preoccupied. We're constantly taking in things in our minds, whether it be on a screen or a TV, or we're constantly connected to social media, or we're constantly checking our emails, or we're constantly working, or whatever. We have not taken up God on his idea of what it really means to rest. And I want to remind you of this. He designed us. The Creator knows the best way for us to live. So if we aren't doing the commandment of Sabbath on a regular basis, we are going against God's original design. And at some point, we will crash and we will burn. Do you understand that? Because God created all the earth in 5 days. On the sixth day, he created us. What was the very, very first thing that God commanded Adam and Eve to do and all of his creation? I mean, think about this. He literally just created everything. We're coming off the assembly line, you could say. What is the very first thing that he commands us to do? What was the seventh day? Hey guys, I created you. Now this is what I want you to do. Do nothing. Rest. The seventh day was rest. Some people think the culmination of creation was when he created Adam and Eve. Actually, the culmination or the pinnacle of creation was the seventh day of rest, when he sat back as God and said, I've created all of this, and by the way, it's really, really good. So that, you know what that teaches us? It teaches us something that is the exact opposite of what you've been taught in our culture. You've been taught in our culture that you work, and you earn rest. God says, no, no, no. You are created, then you rest, and then you work. In other words, you rest to work. You don't work to rest. Now, some of you are like, that's mind-blowing. Yes, because this is the thing. We've been taught in our companies that, you know what, you work so many days and then you get a vacation day. You earn them, right? And that's the thing. That is the exact opposite of how God created us. In fact, those of you that are type A, those of you that are executives, those of you that are Enneagram 8s like me, you're going to love what I'm about ready to say, all right? That is this, is that you first rest so that you become a better worker. You rest first so that your work can be great. You don't make yourself weary so that you earn a day of rest. You see, work without rest is slavery. And rest without work is laziness. So therefore, you need both work and you need rest. God is described in the Bible as being the Lord of the Sabbath and the Lord of the harvest, all at the same time. It means this, that he's the Lord of the Sabbath, which means he says, rest in him. But then he's also the Lord of the harvest, which means produce in him, create in him, work in him. It's both and, it's not one or the other. And God says that this day off is holy, which means you and I don't make it holy. It is already holy. He just invites us to come into his holiness. Does that make sense? The Sabbath is going to be holy whether you enter into it or not. So you must enter into it if you want to experience the holiness that God has for you. This is mind-blowing. We think this. In America, we think, well, okay, if I take a day off, if I rest, if I Sabbath, what's that going to do for me? Oh, how American of you to ask that. Because we're always like, well, what's it going to benefit me? Here's the thought. We do it because God commanded it. Period. And I know this is very unorthodox in our nation because we always want to know why God says something. Well, sometimes he's just God and he says it, so we do it. Does that make sense? And so here's a thought. You are designed to recreate so that you can recreate. Think about that. You are to recreate so that you can recreate. In other words, that when you rest, you become a better worker. You become a better contributor. You become a better person. So, what do you do on your day off? Do you even take a day off? The majority of my life, for decades, my day off looked like every other day of my week. I would check my emails, I would take appointments, I would return text messages, I'd have my laptop, I would work, I would do all the things that I did on all the other 6 days. And you know what I found myself doing? I found myself becoming really tired. Yes, even this ESTJ, Enneagram 8 command or challenger kind of executive type personality, I'd find myself becoming very, very tired. And then I'd take a vacation. And when I take a vacation once a year, I would come off of my vacation more tired. Have you ever do that before? You know why? Because we can't think that one vacation is going to make up for 50 weeks of disobedience. You like this morning? See, we think we can disobey the Sabbath every week and then make it up by, a trip to somewhere, to Florida, going to Disney World with the kids. That is not rest. That's a little slice of hell, can I tell you? Right? It's 90 degrees, you're sweating, it's 100% humidity. Your kids are whiny. You have gone in debt. I mean, I'm telling you, that's not vacation. That's not rest. And you're thinking, I haven't taken a day off for a year, but I'm going to go to Disney and I'm going to rest. I found myself becoming irritable, preoccupied. Like my family, they can tell when I haven't had rest. Because I'm edgy. I get ticked about the littlest things. See, all of us manifest our depleted soul in different ways. So for me, I become edgy, I become more sarcastic. It's kind of like my mother tongue. I always have to keep that in check. I become angry at people. I become angry at myself. That's how I manifest it. But some of you get tired and you go into a dark place and you go to be alone. You find maybe depression starts coming up. Maybe you start giving in to vices or addictions or things that you've kicked a long time ago with the help of the Holy Spirit, but you go back to those things when you're tired. You make bad decisions, right? So this is the thing. We all manifest it in very different ways. And I found out for myself that I, ironically, was not producing good work because I was working all the time. Think about that. I was not producing good work because I was working all the time. So I've learned some things. I will tell you, as your pastor, I am not perfect at this yet. I am still working on it. So don't look at me as the beacon of hope here, right? I'm just telling you what I've learned. And I'm going to tell you also what others have taught me and how I've tried to implement some things in the middle of this never disconnect culture that we live in. When I started in my career, you couldn't get a hold of me unless you had my home landline. Now, People can get a hold of anybody through text messaging, through cell phones. In other words, guess what? It never stops, right? So, I want you to know this at the very beginning. From the very beginning, I want you to know this. Rest is hard work. And some of you are like going, that's a paradox. Yes, it is. It's like rest is hard work. You have to be incredibly intentional about it. In fact, in the Old Testament, after the children of Israel had been released from slavery for 400 years, where they had work and no rest, which is slavery, for 400 years, they finally are on their way to the promised land, and they're in the middle of the wilderness, and so God is providing food for them. It was called manna. We don't know what manna really is. We just know that it was provided for them every morning. When they'd wake up, it would be there on the ground. They would go gather it for the day. All right? And every single day, the manna would be there, except for one day. It was Sabbath. And God said, I'm not going to provide manna for you on the 7th day. Instead, this is what you had to do. On the 6th day, you had to collect twice as much manna to hold you over until the week began again, because you had a Sabbath day coming, 24 hours where there would be no manna. So what you would do is you would actually have to work twice as hard on the day before Sabbath. Rest is hard work. It's why most of us don't do it. You have to actually work twice as hard the day before you take a day off. It's kind of like vacation. Some of you are going on vacation this summer, or already been on vacation. So this is what you do. At work, what do? You work really hard the week leading up to vacation, right? You're trying to cover all your bases. You're trying to make sure your house is ready. You're trying to pack. You're trying to do all of these things. You're working really hard the day before you go on vacation. Why? Because you want to disconnect. You don't want to bring work with you. And so, rest is hard work. If you want to have a Sabbath, you actually have to work really hard the 6 other days. See, again, this is going to make some of you that are type A personalities, you're actually going to lean into this idea of Sabbath, because you're like, oh, he said hard work. He said hard work. I like him. All right, okay. So you do that. 6 days, you work really, really hard. Lord of the harvest. But then on that 7th day, you've worked really hard for those 6 so that you can take that day and free it up. Sabbath is not an excuse to drop the ball or not get things done. It's quite the opposite. Actually, the invitation to Sabbath is an invitation to work really hard the other 6 days of the week. Do you hear that? Eugene Peterson, he's the one that created the Message version of the Bible. Some of you have heard of the Message version. We use it from time to time here. You might even own a Bible. It's the Message version. Eugene Peterson said this. He said, the root of workaholism is laziness. Why? Because you're too lazy to create boundaries and too lazy to say no. See, some of you, I just made you mad. You're an executive and I just made you mad. Actually, if you're a workaholic, you're lazy, because you cannot create the boundaries to give yourself a Sabbath. It is hard work to rest. So some of you might ask the question as we start wrapping things up here, why do I really need a Sabbath? Why do I really need to do this on a weekly basis? Well, my first answer is a simple one, because God said so, period, okay? Got to remember something. If he is Lord, if Jesus is Lord, it means he's ruler over all. And what he commands, we do. It's the way it should work. See, we live in a democracy and we think, oh, no, I could vote against that. I could vote Jesus out in 4 years. Okay, no. Mm-mm. He is in charge, which means that when he says it, we do it. But let me give you another reason, which I think is a really good reason that you'll like. The reason you should Sabbath is because this world, and especially the people that are closest to you, need a better you. Need a better you. In fact, they need the best you. Your kids need the best you. Your spouse needs the best you. Your best friends need the best you. Your family needs the best you. And when you are not taking Sabbath, you are not giving them the best you. William Wilberforce, who was credited for abolishing slavery in the UK, he had put forth legislation to outlaw slavery 17 times. 16 of those times, it was shot down. It was not voted in. So 17 times, think about this, 17 times over many, many years, he had to put forth legislation to abolish slavery until finally, the 17th time, it was voted in. He says, if you were to read his personal journals, he said this: the thing that kept him going is that he took a day off every week. And here's the reason why. He said his mission to abolish slavery was too important for him to burn out. Your mission in life is too important for you to burn out. Do you understand that? I want you to know, your kids are too important for you to burn out. Your marriage is too important for you to burn out. Your contribution to the company or the organization you work for is too important for you to burn out. You hear that? You're too important to burn out and live depleted. And some of you are depleted right now. And I don't say that as a finger-pointing, judgmental thing. I say that as, I've been there multiple times too. I know what it's like to be putting a smile on, going to work, giving leadership, giving directives, do all those things, but on the inside, I'm tapping a well that is dry. You have been there too. Some of you are there. So what do you do on Sabbath? What do you do? Well, this isn't a directive so you can just binge watch Netflix, okay? All right? Now, some of you might say, well, I want to do it. Okay, it's all right to a degree, okay? But you see, let's just look at what maybe Jesus did on Sabbath. Well, I'll tell you what he did. Jesus ate food. It's a good thing. He ate good food. You know what else he did? He hung out with friends. Another thing he did, he rested. You know what else he did? He cast out demons, which means sometimes problems come up on Sabbath. And you got to deal with them. You know what else he did? He healed the sick. So sometimes there's needs on Sabbath. It's not like you just go lock yourself in a room. Okay? What else did he do? He wasn't in a hurry, which means on Sabbath he didn't schedule anything. You know what really you should do on Sabbath? Something that gives you life. And for every one of us, it's different. You know what it is for me? I like tinkering with things around the house. I like building things. I like fixing things. So on my day off, you know what I do? I fix things almost all day. I mean, but it's not work related. It's like something's broken in the house, or I might paint something, or I might build something. I like that. Why? Because it gives me life. What gives you life? Can I challenge you to do this on your Sabbath? Put your phone on Do Not Disturb. Maybe even turn it off. Seriously. Figure out a hobby. Get outside. Some of you are like going, oh, it's so cold. When did we turn into weenies? Okay, come on. I know some of you in Florida, you're like going, it's never cold here. All right, we're happy for you. Okay, anyway, this is the thing. Up here, it gets cold. And sometimes we're like, oh, we don't want to go outside. Go outside. Because you know what? We can do this. We can get outside. We can have physical activity. We can hang out with family. We can hang out with friends. We can put down the screens. I want to end saying this, or I didn't realize some of you, today's message, you're going, this is what you're thinking the whole time. You're like thinking, this is impossible for me. But maybe you're a workaholic, or maybe you're a single parent. You're going, how in the world do I get a day off? Or maybe you run a business. And you're like, man, I'd love to take a day off, but I have no one that's going to run the shop. All right, I don't have a specific answer, but I do have a little bit of a general direction. And it's found in the book of Hebrews, and this is how we're going to close. In the book of Hebrews, the author is talking about Sabbath. And he says this. He says, there remains then a Sabbath rest. Other versions say this, there still is a Sabbath opportunity. Some of you need to hear that. Even if you've spent decades, like I did, blowing off Sabbath, there's still a Sabbath for you. Sabbath rest for the people of God. For anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. Let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest. Let me say that line again. Here's your directive, all right? Let us therefore make every effort. Make every effort. Can you say that with me? Make every effort to enter that rest so that no one will perish by following their example of disobedience. So I don't know exactly how to do it, but if you're a single parent in here, if you're a business owner, even if you're a workaholic and you're like, oh, I got to kind of detox from this a little bit. All right, make every effort. Is it 3 hours? Can you find 3 hours somewhere? Can you find maybe 6 hours somewhere? This is where the church could be the church, by the way. Like, this is where I love like life groups, okay? Don't call the church and ask us to watch your kids, because we don't have enough people to do that, all right? But this is the thing. Within a life group, there may be some of you that are empty nesters, and you have someone in your life group that has a full family, and you're looking in the eyes of that couple and they are fatigued, and you say, you know what? Hey, listen, Friday night, drop the kids off. We're gonna go ahead and I'm gonna, we'll watch a movie, make popcorn or whatever. You guys go get a date night. You guys go do that. If you're an empty nester in here, if you're a grandparent in here, if you're a person that's maybe even single in here and you're like going, you know what? I could help a single parent, or I could help a couple that's like sinking. See, this is where we can help each other. We could help each other as a church to find a couple of hours here and there. Make every effort. I'm out of notes and I'm out of time. So let me pray for you. But I want us to bow our heads and close our eyes at every location. And I want you to answer this question before God about his commandment, not his suggestion. Are you willing to make every effort? Is the answer yes? Or is the answer no? Is the answer I'm not sure? Hey, in the words of the wise theologian Yoda, do or do not. There is no try, okay? Make every effort. Heavenly Father, I pray, rest. Rest on weary souls, on lives that are too full, on minds that are stressed, on people that are running ragged. Rest. Lord God, you're not going to give it to us with a doink of a magic wand. You'll give us rest when we obey your command. So I pray, even beginning this week, we would make every effort to put rest on our playlist of life, and may it be on repeat. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's give God a huge round of applause.